All right. So we have, presumably you have your Docker installed or you've already had Docker installed. What we need to do is we need to get some code that we can then push to a code repository. So I'm going to use the git clone command, and we're just going to use the same Azure sample, the voting app, but instead we're going to basically clone it, get it onto our local environment, and I can say cd Azure voting app. Okay, so we've downloaded the voting app to our local computer. Now, you know, with Docker, we have our Docker compose file, and so we can say it contains the instructions on how to build this as a containered image. So if I say Docker compose up, then we can get this Docker compose, the instructions from the Docker compose file, and create them as containers in our local here. So now it's pulling down the Redis in terms of the backend, Nginx as terms of a web server. We're going to let this run for a little bit. It seems like it has some work to do. And I do want to say what we're seeing here is an example of the power of containers and Docker particularly. Let's go over to our Docker compose file, and we can see how small it is, right? It's got two services, the front and the back. It gives the image where the code comes from, the container name, and there's a definition of the ports that these Docker containers respond to. So very simple Docker compose file, and after all of that, we end up with a couple of Docker containers working and running, right? So if I say Docker container ls, we can see that we have two containers with the image of the front and one of the image of the back, created 58 seconds ago, running on different ports. So very, very cool how we got a working program on our local just by saying Docker compose up. So we can see that Docker has assigned Docker runs within a virtual box, right? So that virtual box has an IP address. So this is the virtual box that contains Linux operating system, and there's an IP address assigned to this. So docker-machine IP default will tell us the IP address. If we go to this IP address on my computer, it's 192.168.99.100, port 8080. Then we have our own local machine with a copy of this container. So we downloaded the code and pushed it, basically Docker compose up into a container on our local. And by accessing the port, the IP address of the machine on our local with the right port, then we've gotten this.